I'm begging you in the name of Jesus, stop Islamic agenda. All over Nigeria, the Igbos, South Christian, be ready for self-defense. If Nigeria is going to be turned upside down, let it be. Haba! Under Muslim ticket, they want to finish us. Please, I'm waiting for my arrest. It will be far better for me. I will have a relief in police custody, in army custody, guard room, than to be outside crying every day, mourning, suffering, popping down, comforting the people. Christian, wake up!
It was 11:30 at night, Saturday, the 11th of July, 2026, in a quiet farming village called Kum, in the highlands of central Nigeria. Armed men came out of the dark and into a compound of a Christian family. And the survivors say the men called out a question as they came. They wanted to know where one particular man was. They asked for the father of the house by name. He wasn't there. So they said, "Today you will learn a hard lesson." And then they opened fire on the family. 9 people were killed in that compound before the night was over. Grandparents, a mother, children. The youngest was a baby, 2 months old. The man they came for was a pastor named Ezekiel Dachomo. And the reason they wanted him is the reason we're making this video. He would not stop telling the world what is being done to the Christians of Nigeria. Hi friends, I'm Nat, and this is Mrs. O, Faithful Unto Death. I need to say something before we begin, because this isn't one of our usual episodes. Almost every story on this channel is history. People who died centuries ago, whose names we bring back so that they won't be forgotten. Today is different. Today, the people died a few weeks ago, and as I record this, the family is still burying their dead, and the pastor those men came for is still alive, and he has just been handed a written letter telling him that he is next. There's no settling with a cup of coffee today. I'm just going to tell you what happened, who these people were, who did this, and what they believe, where this is happening and why almost nobody in the Western world is talking about it. Because one thing we can still do for them is refuse to let them be forgotten. So let's get into it. To understand what happened in that compound, you have to understand where it happened. Because in Nigeria, the map itself is part of the story. Nigeria is the giant of Africa. More than 230 million people, the most populous country on the continent. And it's split roughly into 3 bands. The north is mainly Muslim, the south is mainly Christian, and running straight across the waist of the country where those 2 worlds meet and overlap is a region everyone calls the Middle Belt. Right in the heart of that Middle Belt sits Plateau State, named for the high, cool green tableland at its center, the Jos Plateau. It's a beautiful country, rocky hills, terraced farms, some of the best farmland in all Nigeria, and it has been Christian farming country for generations. Now I want to tell you who actually lives there because these people matter. The people of these hills are mostly from a group called the Berom, along with the related peoples like the Irigwe and the Tarok. They are farmers. They grow grain, yams, and potatoes, amongst other things. They have their own languages, and they are overwhelmingly Christian. In fact, more than 200 years ago, when an Islamic holy war, a jihad, swept across northern Nigeria in 1804 and conquered the Muslim north. It was the peoples like the Berom up in these highlands who held out and were never conquered. When Christianity came to the region, these were the people who embraced it. So their Christian faith and their identity as free highland peoples are bound up together and have been for a very long time. And I have to be careful and fair here because how this gets described in the news really matters. You will very often see this called farm herder violence or climate conflict, and there's a real layer of truth in that. So let me give you it straight. For generations, there's been friction over the land in the Middle Belt between the settled Christian farmers and the nomadic cattle herders from a people called the Fulani, who are Muslim and who moved their herds down from the dying north in search of grass and water. As the Sahara pushes south and the land dries out, those herders come further and further into the farmers' fields, and cattle trample crops, and tempers flare, and people on both sides have been killed in that cycle for years. That is all true, but it does not explain what happened in Kum, because you don't settle an argument about grazing land by coming into a family home at 11:30 at night with automatic rifles and asking for a Christian pastor by name. That is why so many people on the ground, the survivors, the Nigerian Christian leaders, and international watchdogs say farmer versus herder label has become a way of hiding something. What they describe is armed militias drawn from the Fulani, carrying out organized one-sided attacks, coming at night, targeting Christian villages, churches and pastors, and then slipping back to bases in the bush before dawn. Whatever it began as decades ago, they say what it has become is the deliberate killing and driving out of Christian communities from their lands. So let me tell you the hard numbers next to it and tell you plainly what the record shows, because this is not just one tragic night. It is a pattern, and the pattern is enormous. There's a Nigerian research group called ORFA, Observatory for Religious Freedom in Africa, that has been counting, and their count is staggering. From 2019 to the autumn of 2025, they record more than 79,000 people killed in terror-related violence in Nigeria. That is around 36 people every single day for 6 years. And here is the part that turns the usual story on its head. Most people in the West, if they've heard of violence in Nigeria at all, have heard of Boko Haram, the Islamic group that kidnapped those schoolgirls back in 2014, and its offshoot, the group called ISWAP. But according to the same count, the armed Fulani militias killed far more people in those years than Boko Haram and ISWAP combined. The militias account for something like 44% of the deaths. Boko Haram and ISWAP together, about 12. Let that land. The deadliest killers of Christians in Nigeria are not the group in the headlines. They are the ones almost nobody is naming. Over the years, the wider toll of this Middle Belt conflict runs into the tens of thousands killed since around the year 2000, and millions of people driven from their homes into displacement camps. In the Plateau State alone, hundreds of churches have been burned. Now, is this a genocide? That is a heavy, specific word, and people argue about it. The Nigerian government insists that it's just herders and farmers fighting over land and pushes back hard on the religious framing. The survivors and Pastor Dachomo himself use the word genocide without hesitation. They say they are being wiped out for their faith while the world looks away. What I can tell you for certain is that in 2026, even the United States government formally designated Nigeria a country of particular concern over the killing of Christians. So this is not a fringe claim. It has reached the highest levels. So let's go back to that now and tell it carefully from what the survivors and the reporters on the ground have said. The village is called Kum in the Rim district in the Berom area of Plateau State. just south of the city of Jos, and the people there had actually been warned. In the days before, there were rumors and alerts that an attack might be coming, but as one of the survivors put it, they were watching and they were praying, but they had no way to defend themselves. They had no guns. The men who came did. At around 11:30 on the night of Saturday, the 11th of July, going into the early hours of Sunday the 12th, the gunmen broke into the family compound. They asked for the father of the house. They said, quote, "Today you will learn a hard lesson," unquote. And when they could not find the man they wanted, they turned their guns on the family. 9 members of one extended family were killed. Among them were women. Among them were older relatives, a generation that had already survived a lifetime in a dangerous place. Among them were children, and the youngest was a baby of 2 months. The 9 were buried the next day together, and this was not the first time this family had been touched by it. Pastor Dachomo has said that a grandmother of his and an uncle were killed in earlier attacks. This is a man who, by the reckoning of those who know him, had already stood and buried the dead of these massacres more than 70 times before they came for his own household. So who was the man that they wanted so badly that they killed 9 people trying to reach him? His name is Reverend Ezekiel Dachomo. He's a pastor and a regional leader, the regional chairman for the Barkin Laddie area of one of the largest Protestant denominations in the Nigerian Middle Belt, the Church of Christ in Nations, known as Kokan. He's a Berom man, born and rooted in these highlands south of Jos. And among his own people, they don't just call him pastor. They call him Dara, which in the Berom language means father. He was a father and grandfather figure to the very people who were killed that night. That is what the father of this house really means. When those men asked for the father, they were asking for the man the whole community looked to as father. For years, Ezekiel Dachomo has done the one thing the men with the guns cannot stand. He has refused to be silent. He has stood at funeral after funeral, dozens upon dozens of them. And instead of only weeping, he has picked up his phone and filmed and spoken and told the outside world exactly what is happening to his people. He has named it. He has called it a genocide. He has pleaded with his own government and with the governments around the world to come and help. That is his crime, and he has said so himself. After the attack, he wrote a public message, and I'll read you his own words because they say it much better than what I can. He asked, quote, "Is my crime that I speak for widows who have no voice? Is my crime that I cry for orphan children whose parents were murdered? Is my crime that I tell the stories of persecuted Christians in Nigeria so that the world will not forget them?" Unquote. That is a man describing this channel's whole reason for existing, telling the stories so that the world will not forget. And it is the very thing they are trying to kill him for today. Days after he buried his family, the militia made good on the threat in writing. They sent him a letter in both Hausa and English, telling him that they would kill him just as they killed his 9 relatives. He has read that letter, he knows what it means, and he has not gone quiet. He's still there in the hills south of Jos, still telling the story. I want to talk to you about the 9 now, and I have to be honest with you about what I can and cannot give you. The full list of the names has not been released, and I'm not going to read unverified names of murdered people over the internet just a month after they died. They belong to a grieving family, not to me. So I can't actually give you the 9 biographies the way I want to, but I can refuse to let them just become a number, because that's exactly what happens. 9 killed in Nigeria, a headline, scrolled past, gone by lunchtime. And the whole point of this channel is to stop and refuse to scroll past. So hold this. 9 people were alive on Saturday evening. who had eaten dinner, who had spoken to each other, who had ordinary plans for Sunday. They were dead by Sunday morning. There were women among them. There were grandparents who had already lived through this kind of terror before. And there were children and a little baby, 2 months old. She had a name even if we don't know it. She had a mother who fed her in the night. Someone held her when she cried. She had not spoken her first word. She had not taken her first step, and she's gone, along with the 8 people who loved her, because a man in that household had dared to speak up for the persecuted. The world is very good at forgetting a baby it never knew the name of. We're not going to do that. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:10. So what can we actually do sitting where we are on the other side of the world? A few things, and they are not nothing. Remember them. Pray for Ezekiel Dachomo. Mention him to one person this week. Tell them about the family at Coombe. The men who did this are counting on the world forgetting by next week. So the simple act of remembering and telling is the exact thing they're trying to kill this pastor to prevent. If you're able to help, I'll put some trustworthy organizations in the description, groups getting real aid and support to these communities. I'm not sponsored by any of them, and I don't take a penny from this. I've just done the research and founded legitimate organizations. And if this is a family you find yourself thinking about tonight, the Nigerian believers have asked over and over for one thing, all from Christians in the rest of the world. They have asked us to pray for them. So do that. Pastor Dachomo knows he may be killed for telling the story. He's telling it anyway. The least we can do is make sure it travels, that the sacrifice of the 9 people in a compound in Coombe is not swallowed up in silence. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. Revelation 2:10. If this moved you, please don't just like it and move on. Share it. Send it to one person who needs to know this is happening. Do it for them, not for me. And keep the Dachomo family and the whole Nigerian church in your prayers this week. Thank you for watching. The light still shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. God bless you. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will see you next week.